If I could have your attention, we'll get underway here.
No difference.
Because I think Christine is probably already upset with me that we're 5 minutes late. So I apologize right off the bat. Again, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Marquette University Law School. I'm Mike Houchet, and this is On the Issues. Many of you know this is our continuing series of conversations with news and policymakers, people we like to say are doing interesting, important work in this region and beyond. Today we're going to talk Wisconsin politics. Joining us today are the Speaker of the Assembly, Robin Vos, the Republican from the Burlington area in Racine County, and the Assembly Minority Leader, Peter Barca, the Democrat from Kenosha. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us. Let's give them a warm welcome to Marquette Law School.
Thank you.
We're delighted to have the two of them together in this room, although the two of you actually do this from time to time. This is not uncommon for the Republican Vos and the Democrat Barca to get together and talk Wisconsin politics, is it?
Yeah, no, not at all. We actually have a once-a-month series. It's called Civil Dialogue, where Peter and I have it on Wisconsin Eye. So for any of you who watch it, I'm sure you probably all follow along on a monthly basis on what Peter and I say. But for those of you who watch Wisconsin Eye, we have a good time.
Yeah, not only that, we did an event at the governor's mansion during December where we gave each other speeches.
Oh, that's right.
So we're pretty accustomed to what we're going to say.
Well, let me...
Not that we won't be spontaneous.
I know, but very spontaneous. Let me, first of all, thank you for being with us. And maybe this is a good place to start our conversation today. You're talking about civility in politics. And a couple of years ago, the state legislature was a pretty tough place to be. What's it like today? Speaker Vos?
Well, it's definitely different. I think that for some, those scars are a bit deeper than others. I look at the fact that we were able to make pretty significant changes in Wisconsin. Right or wrong, they are in the past. And
wrong, though, definitely.
That's definitely where Peter is. But I would say that the whole point of having a debate and a discussion is to not focus only on the past. I mean, yes, you want to make changes. You want to try to correct things that you think were an injustice on one side or the other. But I try to focus as much as we can on the future. Peter and I had a really good start to the year. I give him credit for that. Because we both said, look, we can either keep arguing about what's happened in the past, we can try to find common ground and move forward. We had a good first day. We agreed to co-sponsor together for probably the first time an inaugural celebration where Republicans and Democrats were in the same room celebrating something that should be a nonpartisan day. We then went to the floor later that next week, and we were able to pass a rules package, the vast majority of which we agreed on. Not all of it, but the vast majority of which just yesterday we were able to pass jobs bills. I had some consternation from my own caucus because we had a Democrat bill on the calendar, heaven forbid, but there was a Democrat bill that we actually thought was a good idea. So we're trying to put some of those things in the past. We still have lots to argue about, but there are definite ways we can work together on common ground.
How would you describe the atmosphere?
Well, much better. And really, the Speaker's credit. I mean, as the Speaker indicated, it's true. I mean, we sat down together, and we feel that, look, the people of the state have better confidence in their government when they can see that there is civility, when you're making efforts to agree to disagree on certain things. There'll be certain things that'll be very contentious. Next week, I suspect, might be one of them on the mining issue. But on the other end of the spectrum, not everything has to be contentious. And so we're making every effort to, try and set an example, a positive example. I think everybody's distressed at what's going on in Washington with it being so dysfunctional at this juncture with such discord and no agreement. We're trying to find ways and pathways to not have that happen here. And I think it's important. I mean, this state has a tradition of people rolling up their sleeves, attempting to work together, attempting to make progress on behalf of the citizens of the state. And so we're going to keep striving for that as much as we can. The last 2 years, as I said at the Counties Association at the end of the year, they asked myself and Senator Fitzgerald what we'd tell the new incoming elected members. And I told them that I hoped they would have amnesia in terms of the way in which business was conducted. Obviously, we can't forget many of the policies, and we're still going to be battling over those. But, the idea that, you lock people out of the building, you turn off people's microphones, you violate the rules, we're a huge problem, frankly.
Luckily, Peter's let it all go.
But what's that?
I said, luckily, you've let it all go.
I haven't forgotten that. Still fresh memories, but that hasn't happened this session. And I think under Speaker Vos' leadership, that won't happen this time.
Well, let me raise something that was sort of hanging over the events of the last couple of years, and this was the John Doe probe. And as some of you in the room know, the decision has been made to end the John Doe probe. It's over now. What's your reaction to that? I'll begin with you, Speaker, and then Leader Barca?
Well, I give credit to Governor Walker, first of all, because remember the entire way this John Doe investigation began was that he suspected things in his office were not going the way that they should, and people were following the same ethical standard that he wanted out of the employees in his office. He contacted the DA began the investigation, and people were charged. That's the process that we should utilize. I think that, unfortunately, people in the heat of a political campaign with a recall began to try to draw some negativity toward Governor Walker because he did that. We now know that that chapter, once again, of Wisconsin is closed. He's been totally vindicated. He did nothing wrong. Somebody who's innocent should maintain that innocence until they're proven guilty. The DA said there was nothing to do, and he dropped the charges. So the process worked as it should have. Unfortunately, people attempted to use it for political purposes, and that was really unfortunate.
Representative?
Well, I don't think there was anything political about it at all. I mean, this was a criminal investigation. 6 people had been prosecuted. Obviously, it was a very serious violation of the taxpayers of this state with many of the activities and certain to the veterans of one particular post. And so it is over. I think for the good of the state, I'm glad it's over. We don't want to replicate Illinois and have our governors in prison. However, this state has a reputation for clean, open, and honest government. And we need, I think at this point, the governor who said he couldn't speak before this now would be wise to make a statement and to apologize. Because it was under his watch. He hired these people. He supervised these people. And under his watch, the taxpayers were cheated, veterans were cheated. And he should just outline what he's going to do different and how he's going to try to assure that this won't happen again. He was extremely critical of his predecessor when one of his employees was criminally prosecuted and later exonerated. And so he should try to live up to those same high standards he was calling on his predecessor to live up to, and then we should move on.
What do you think about an apology? Do you think that's appropriate or not appropriate?
I mean, it's Governor Walker's decision. I think that any time someone who works for you violates your trust, not only is it sad for the taxpayers, but it's sad as a manager. You cannot take and micromanage every one of your employees, especially I think in Milwaukee County, there are, 4,000 or 5,000 employees. He does not know what each one does every day. So if he chose to do that, I think that'd be fine. If he doesn't choose to, that's his decision.
Let's talk policy. There's a lot going on in Madison right now. We'll walk through some of the key pieces of the state budget in a moment, but I do want to spend a couple of moments on mining and mining reform legislation. As most of you in this room know, the Senate passed it by 1 vote last week. The Assembly will vote on it, this week. The Assembly will vote on it, Thursday or so of this week? And it will, in all likelihood, pass. And I guess the question is, and I will flip this around here in a second, but I'm going to begin with Speaker Voss again.
I know he likes the last word. It's okay.
Well, no, in this case, since you're the party in power, I think it's appropriate. Give me your sense. At the end of the day, there's still a lot of talk about possible legal action. There is still talk about the ever-changing iron ore market. At the end of the day, are we going to see hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs from this, or is that really pie in the sky?
No, I definitely believe that we are going to see an operational iron mine in northern Wisconsin. Let's just talk about for a minute how the process has happened. Last spring, a year ago now, the company came to us saying, look, the mining laws in Wisconsin really don't allow us to open up an active operational mine where you can make a profit. Even Democrats have conceded that there were problems, and then that began the process of having a bill that was introduced. They did not like the way we introduced the bill. And I have to be honest to say that the bill that we're going to vote on Thursday is a better bill than it was a year ago. That's part of the system that we go through. I was proud of the one, and I think it would have been good, but the one that we have now is going to be better. We have taken and probably had more hearings on this bill, more opportunity for testimony, more opportunity for changes than anything besides the state budget. If you recall, last spring, Senator Darling and I took the bill that passed the state Senate, or the Assembly, trying to compromise with Senator Schultz to get him there. I think he requested 9 changes to the bill. We gave him 7 of the 9, but he wanted all 9 or he wouldn't vote yes. Well, that's not really the consensus process of give and take. So we couldn't get a bill passed, and we came to this fall, or the fall we had the election. I think if you look at the 18th Senate District with Senator Gudex, the main reason that I believe he won was because he wanted to have a mining bill passed that would really bring mining jobs here. A Republican majority came back to the state Senate. we began the process again, more and more changes. I think we had over 20 changes to the bill that we had negotiated out of joint finance, all of which were protecting the environment, ensuring that we had more process that gave additional responsibilities to those who protect the environment the most. And we have a bill now which has got broad consensus. There are some who are opposed to it and who will be no matter what. I have met with Chairman Wiggins. The Bad River Band of Chippewa have said to me that under no circumstances will they support a mine. No circumstances. Well, it's pretty hard to negotiate with somebody who says under no circumstances will I support your bill. And there were environmentalists who were in that same exact category who have now tried to make a political issue out of something that should really just be a policy difference. But that's their right. And I think the bill will pass. It will have broad Republican support. I wish it would be bipartisan. And Peter could make news today if he'd say that.
Well, it could be bipartisan. In fact, you know what? It's very simple. We just take the actual bipartisan bill that Senator Cullen, Senator Schultz, and Senator Jelk worked on and pass that, and we will have a bipartisan bill, and we'll have a better bill. We'll have a bill that actually will lead to more of a likelihood that you could actually cite a mine and save the taxpayers millions of dollars in attorney fees in the process. The bill that we have before us is a little bit better bill, and I do want to give the Speaker credit for making an effort to make it a little bit better. But it still falls far short of what I think would be a mining law that could work effectively for this state. Senator, I'm one of the lead authors in the Assembly of the Cullen bill, but really it's Senator Cullen, Senator Schultz, and Senator Jelk, all of whom have been in leadership spots, all of whom highly responsible legislators on both sides of the aisle. As Democrats and Republicans, they both were majority leaders. And they worked extremely hard. They followed a process that really is a model for Wisconsin, of going to northern Wisconsin, going around the state, collecting testimony, and listening, and incorporating it into a bill that mirrors almost identically Minnesota's laws, which Minnesota is one of the leading mining states in the country. And that's a process I think the people would feel far more comfortable with, and it is a bipartisan bill. On the process, I think the Speaker would even acknowledge that the process wasn't so good this time. The authors of the bill refused to submit to public questioning. I don't know that we've ever seen that before. They said, come to our office and we'll privately answer any questions you have. Now, because of Speaker Voss, they did later answer the questions in writing, which I did appreciate. But that is not good for Wisconsin democracy. Authors of bills should testify on the record, answer questions on the record, so we can examine their responses, and so other experts can look at their responses and find out where there may be flaws and find out where there may be commonality where we can come together. So we won't pass a bipartisan bill come next week, but we could have. Senate was one vote away from being able to do that. We'll see how this goes forward. My prediction, though, Mike, in conclusion, is that we will end up spending millions of dollars once again, as we've done over the last couple of years in attorney fees, because of passing a flawed bill.
Do you think there's any chance this will be a replay of what happened in Crandon? I worked in Wausau many years ago when they were talking about siting a mine in Crandon, and this thing ended up being tied up in court forever and never happened. Is that a possibility here?
It is possible. I mean, we're in the law school. Lawyers make a whole lot of money to sue people. So will it surprise me that there will probably be a lawsuit filed? No. That's why we have done everything we possibly can to prepare for that eventuality, because, as I mentioned, the Bad River Chippewa are going to sue no matter what. So we did not willy-nilly craft a bill without considering the consequences, that it's a likelihood that this will end up in court. We did take some of the better ideas of Senator Cullen's proposal. One of the simple ideas that we had is providing certainty in the mining statute. Right now, you can literally go a decade never getting an answer yes or no. That's not right. So Senator Cullen proposed a timeline, and so did we. It's 100 days difference. It's 3 months. So there's a lot of things where you hear these dramatic changes. They're not really that different. What I always fear is that I want a bill that passes that will actually have a good likelihood in mining jobs coming here. Sometimes I think that what environmentalists and some of those who didn't want to be against jobs, they wanted a bill that they could say they were for that would never actually result in the mine being built. And I believe that's what Senator Cullen's bill would do, is it would give us the opportunity, which politicians love to do, to stand up and wave a flag and say we did something. But years from now, we won't ever actually see a mine.
Take 20 seconds to respond to that, and then I want to move
on.
First
of all, this changes mining laws for any feature mine in the state, so we should be cognizant of that. But from an environmental standpoint, currently the DNR can issue stop orders. If they find there's enormous, potential for serious environmental degradation, they can stop things in its tracks. This would change that process, so they can't have that authority. You have to somehow get to court to be able to make that happen.
The Attorney General.
This is one of the more sensitive areas of the state because of the fact of the flowage it leads to Lake Superior. You know, I traveled the globe before I came back to the legislature. Clean water is one of the most precious resources that we have. The Great Lakes are the largest freshwater supply in the world, and so we want to be careful. And they have scores of pages of exemptions and for environmental laws, and it's not needed.
But we will not be exempting the Bad River Chippewa, who already are polluting the Bad River period today.
Let me jump in, though, and ask very quickly, and then, again, I want to move on here. Isn't it possible that at the end of the day you could craft a piece of legislation that meets all the things that you feel need to be in it, but yet a company is going to say, I'm not going to do business? You've got the perfect piece of legislation, but you don't have anybody wanting to do business. Isn't that possible?
That is possible. There's no question about that, Mike, and I'll acknowledge that up front. But it's also possible you can craft the perfect bill that a company wants, that they'll do business and end up polluting your water supply for generations. So somewhere in the middle is where you want to aim for, is to have a process like Minnesota, which is what the Cullen bill does, that does have a process that's worked for mining companies, numerous mining companies in Minnesota, without having to change forever your environmental protection standards.
But Peter, we still have the EPA and the DNR, who both have to sign off on it. I mean, as far as I know, President Obama is still in office. He is not going to sign off on a mine that results in environmental degradation to Lake Superior. I mean, whether or not you believe Governor Walker, and I believe he does, I think the DNR has the exact same people in place from before Governor Walker was in office, as far as those who will give approvals to the mining company. They're not going to all of a sudden become right-wing, radicals. The same people are in place. So I think it's kind of a red herring, to be honest.
Let me talk about the budget, and I'm going to begin with, I guess, the so-called centerpiece of the budget, and that is the tax cut, the income tax cut. And I'll begin this time with Leader Barca. Do you just think there shouldn't be anything done to taxes in the state? Do Democrats just feel this is the wrong approach? Are taxes okay in Wisconsin? Because the initial reaction from Democrats just very negative. This is not a good idea. It'd be about a $200 difference for a family, a typical family in Wisconsin, over 2 years. So, you guys say that's $2 a month, a cup of coffee a week or something like that. It's, or less than that, I mean.
No, I mean, quite to the contrary. I mean, obviously, the president ran on middle-class tax relief. We believe in middle-class tax relief. I think it's very important. So how you do this makes all the difference. But secondly, I think the Republicans are very effective in getting out this message that was actually not true, that somehow they balanced the budget without raising taxes last time. They did raise taxes, but who did they raise taxes on? People that work for $8, $9 an hour, through curbing back the earned income tax credit. They raised taxes on seniors through curbing back the homestead credit. So as we look now at where we left off last session, if anybody should be in line to get some tax relief, it should be those that get up every morning, work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, but maybe are working in industries and only can afford to pay $8 or $9 an hour. That's who desperately needs tax relief. And we just got a fiscal bureau paper the other day, and in terms of the amount of tax relief, you get a much higher amount of tax relief if you're at the upper income categories, and you do it at the lower income categories. So we don't like the way this is crafted, obviously, and we would craft it differently. We would certainly, first of all, restore the earned income tax credit at the level it should have been at, restore the homestead credit, and then try to provide relief, which ironically is better off economically as well, because those people that work for modest wages, they're the ones that most stimulate the economy, because every dime they get in tax relief, they'll use to fix their roof or buy new clothes for their children or things of that sort. So macroeconomically, as well as just economically for individual families, you're far better off for providing relief to those that most need it, which are those that are either struggling to get in the middle class or those that are barely in the middle class.
Speaker Voss, I think you've said, and some members of your party have said, we wish it were a bigger tax cut. Is there anything you can do to address your concerns on that front?
Well, first of all, let me just correct a few things that I disagree with Representative Barca.
You're kidding.
I know.
What could you possibly disagree with?
So in the last budget, what we did was to give a smaller refund to a few individuals in the state, a small percentage of the state's population. So under the Earned Income Tax Credit, the whole goal is Ronald Reagan's program. It's one that Republicans in general agree with. But what happens is if you work for $8 or $9 an hour, it means you have no income tax liability. You pay zero income taxes. And what the Earned Income Tax Credit does is it takes other people's tax money and it gives you a much larger refund than beyond what you pay. It pretty much covers the entire cost of your payroll tax, other living expenses. So some would call that outside the tax code a welfare check. But because it's inside the tax code and it's based on having to work, we call it the Earned Income Tax Credit. So what Republicans said is we are going to decouple it from an automatic increase that was inside the budget and say, geez, if everybody in the entire state is having to pay less or having to take less home, because they've had Act 10, if you're a public employee, we had to leave the tax increases, over $1 billion put in by the Democrats. We didn't repeal any of those. It's pretty hard to say that we're going to give an automatic increase to one small segment of society. So that's what is considered a tax increase. What our budget actually does is it says we're going to reverse that trend. We are going to stay, President Obama, once again, no wild-eyed conservative, said that your middle income if you earn less than $250,000 a year. That's what he ran on. That's what he told the American public was middle class. So our budget actually says $221,000 and below is considered middle class. So not even as high as President Obama said. And we are going to give tax relief to every single person underneath that $221,000. Now, common sense would tell you if you earn $200,000, you know, two people both working, or if you earn $20,000, you're going to get more at 200 than you would at 20. That is what the rub is. They are saying that we should somehow bias it toward people just at the low end. I want to give it to every single person in the state in that middle income category, actually in all categories, who pay far too much in income taxes. So yes, I chaired a symposium of Republicans and Democrats over the summer that looked at where our income tax code is in relation to the rest of the country. You know what we discovered? If you are poor in Wisconsin, if you are below that $22,000 to $24,000 category, it is one of the best places in the country as far as income taxes to live. Out of the 43 states that have an income tax, we're like number 38, with number 1 being the worst and 43 being the best. So a good place because we help to take care of those who are less able. If you're in the wealthy category, we are about number 15. So certainly not the best place to be successful, but not the worst. But if you're middle income, that $20,000 to $200,000, we're number 4. We are one of the worst places in the country to be a middle income taxpayer. And that's why when Governor Walker and I talked about this, we decided that's the best category to go after. I hope we can find additional ways to look at our tax code, taking out loopholes, special interest giveaways, things that were put in by Republicans and Democrats. There's no one party who has a monopoly on trying to fight corporate welfare. We're doing the same thing. So I hope that we'll be able to take some of those additional... Make it bigger? Yeah, make it bigger.
How much bigger?
We don't know yet. We're still in the process of working that out. My colleague, Dale Kuyenga from Brookfield, is actually heading up our effort. We have already identified several tax credits, which some would call a corporate loophole. That's what I would call them. Others would say that they were focused on some of the tax credits that they gave last time on job creation. We think we can eliminate those and just simply reduce the rates for everybody, and that's a better use of tax dollars than picking winners and losers.
But let me say just one thing in response, very briefly, and that's the idea that it isn't ironic how far to the right the Republican Party has moved. When you've got Ronald Reagan and Tommy Thompson, who I work with on welfare reform measures, in order to keep people off welfare, we wanted to make people better off by working than not working. And now, back then, the governor and President Reagan called this essential tax relief. Now they call it welfare. And, you know, it just shows to me how far they've gravitated. And in speech after speech, I hear Republicans refer to it as welfare. And it's not welfare. It is tax relief for those that struggle the most. And it is true what the Speaker said. It does completely, you know, it is for people that do not have any taxable liability. It does help them with other expenses. But make no mistake about it. If you're, let's say, a single parent, and you're working at $8 an hour, you have $16,000 of income, and let's say you have 2 children. Imagine trying to get by on that level. And don't forget, no matter how much money you make, you still pay sales taxes, you still pay property taxes if you own a place, or if you pay rent, you're still helping to subsidize that property tax payment. So it's not a good deal to work for $8 an hour. It's extremely difficult. And that's why we believe it's people at those wage levels that are struggling to get by, that will help this economy enormously if we just help them a little bit to support their family and dignity. One of the things that makes me the angriest and we had a debate yesterday on this, for providing support for companies in some cases for worker training, which I think is great. It's something I believe is one of the best things we can do, and I'm glad we move forward with that. But we used to always have in this state that you had to at least pay a family supporting job, because I think it's wrong when somebody works 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, and has to suffer the indignity of standing in a food stamp line. I just don't think that's right. And that's why I guess I'm so adamant when it comes to things like the earned income tax credit, because these are people that are doing the right thing. They're not being on welfare. They are working every day, but they're falling further and further behind.
But let's remember, Peter, I mean, we just had a study done that if you are earning $24,000 a year as a family of 3 in Wisconsin, the amount of benefits that taxpayers give you between the health insurance that you get for free,
right,
the rent assistance that the taxpayers provide for you, the earned income tax credit, the opportunity for energy assistance, a free cell phone, you add all of that together, and it's worth $25,000 a year. So a person who is earning significantly less is really at the same wage as a state legislator.
But ironically, you make my point. So why should we subsidize a company to hire somebody at that wages, so then the taxpayers still have to subsidize their health care and their, and their housing and get food stamps for them? I mean, that's why I think it's wrong to subsidize jobs that are at $8 an hour. That's why we've always had in this state provisions that you have to pay a family supporting
But that's not
wage.
where the training dollars are going to go. They're going to go to the department, and they will be able to allocate those as we try to keep and attract companies. I would rather have the money go toward higher skilled jobs that need more training. You don't need a whole lot of training to work at McDonald's.
Let's do it.
I mean, we're not giving it to people who are working at McDonald's. We're giving it to people who are in manufacturing. Now, unfortunately, in the world we live in today, some manufacturing jobs are $12 or $13 an hour when they start. You give training to somebody at $12 an hour, but eventually over time they might be at $20. If the category that you wanted is everybody had to be at a $20 skill, it would only go to train people who are already working in a company. I want to train people who are going to get a brand new hire, who might be at the lower end and will work themselves up the scale.
Yeah, I'm going to.
I know you want to move on.
Yeah,
That's okay. We don't want to.
No, it's
in the weeds
that's
here.
great.
We could talk for all
something
day.
we care about.
That's good to see. Let's kind of continue, I guess, on this theme. The governor decided to turn down the full expansion of Medicaid in this state. And I think his argument was, I want to make people less dependent on the government. We can do this ourselves. We can still put another 200,000 plus people under insurance. Maybe they'll go through the federal health exchanges instead, more of them, instead of going through Medicaid. But I just don't believe the federal government is going to be able to fund this program long term. That's essentially, I think, the argument here. He said yesterday, the governor said, I'm really not interested in people tweaking that proposal. That's what I want. Is it going to be tweaked at all?
No.
No, no changes in it whatsoever.
I mean, I would be very surprised. And let me tell you why, for 2 reasons. You will continually hear this theme that I am trying to accept the world that we are in today and make changes going forward. We had a presidential election in 2012. My candidate lost. So we can either have a re-argument of whether or not we are going to have the Affordable Care Act take effect or not. As a state legislator, I don't get a vote on Obamacare. I don't get to decide whether or not the federal government changes it. I am unhappy. I think it's wrong. I wish it would be repealed. But it's not at this point. So we have to accept the consequences. So if the goal of the Affordable Care Act was to have more people covered by some sort of insurance, that's one that Republicans and Democrats agree on. What the Democrats seem to say, however, is that we want more people on government-funded insurance. That's what Medicaid is. If you're on Medicaid, it basically means you have no co-payments or very low, no deductibles or very low deductibles, and universal coverage. That's what Medicaid really is. The private sector health market is where we want to have the difference in opinion. I want more people to have privately funded health insurance where they can negotiate reasonable rates. If you're a hospital right now and you have a woman come in to deliver a baby, Medicaid pays below the cost of what it costs to actually deliver the baby. The private sector health insurance plan pays a rate according to the Affordable Care Act, which has to be actuarially sound. So I want as many people as possible to maximize the opportunity to have private sector health care. And that's what our proposal does.
Okay. Why does the governor come to that conclusion and yet other Republican governors? And
Well,
there are a number
there's
of
a difference.
Let me
There's a
address.
difference.
Let me address that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason is because Wisconsin, under Tommy Thompson, created, in many ways, a much bigger Medicaid expansion known as Badger Care. It started out as people kids under 18, then it went to the custodial parent, then it went to the non-custodial parent, and then basically Governor Doyle expanded it to you didn't have to have kids.
So you think Michigan and Ohio and Arizona are different?
Well, they all have
cases?
different criteria. I mean, in Wisconsin, basically at 180% of the federal poverty level, we covered people on Medicaid. In Ohio, you're at 70% of the poverty level. In other states, it's significantly below that. They didn't do the expansion with state-funded dollars like we did. They're using the federal government to do it. I think that for them, they have to make their own decisions. But I am not going to put the taxpayers of Wisconsin on the hook for a program that is unsustainable in the long run. Ohio and California and other places have to decide for themselves, but not Wisconsin.
He says no changes.
Well, ironically, you asked a great question, which you kind of sidestepped a little bit. Why did the governor come out with that statement? Because there are a number of Republicans that are saying, why would we make this decision? The federal government will pay 100% for the next 2 or 3 years. I think it's 3, although,
3 years.
and for 3 years, 100%. So that's why, liberal governors like we have in Michigan and John Kasich in Ohio, who I serve with in Congress, and Jan Brewer in Arizona and Susan Martinez in New Mexico accepted the money.
But they're
and so you have, let me just finish. So you have a number of Republicans that are saying, what kind of fiscal decision is this? So Wisconsin taxpayers are now going to have to pay 100% of this freight where the federal government would pay it. Why would we make a decision like that? It's not as if when the governor misled people on the train money where he said, don't worry, we can use it for roads, and we found out we couldn't. In this money, we can't use it for something different. All these other states around us and states led by conservative Republicans are accepting that money. So that means our state taxpayers are going to pay more. But,
Are you
even
convinced
sidestep
the federal government is good for that money down the road?
Well, and here's the issue. And I met with the governor this week on Wednesday on this very issue. And I said, well, Governor, why not? I said, am I correct that we could take this for the next 2 or 3 years? And then if we can't depend on the federal government, we can cancel it? And he said, well, yeah, that is true. We could do that. And he said, I thought about doing that. He said, but then I'm worried that we're creating a new program that somehow it's going to be difficult. We're going to be on the hook for. But, right now, the economy is still soft, and especially here in Wisconsin, we're 42nd in the nation in job growth. So in 2 or 3 years, we could be in an entirely different place, and hopefully we will be. Hopefully the economy will be revved up, and more people will be in the private sector, and they'll be able to afford to make those payments that Robin and I both want. Of course we want people to be on private health insurance. Of course we want people to be at work. That's what we both are we both are struggling in different ways to try to accomplish. But for many people, and you noticed how your voice got lower when you talked about that there's no co-pays or they're very low. There are co-pays in many of these programs, and people are paying what they can pay. But what's low for you and I are not low for people working for $8 an hour.
In Medicaid, it's a $3 optional co-pay.
If you have 2 children, again, you're making $16,000 a year trying to support those kids. You say, well, it's only $10 a month. $10 a month, you're right, for you or I is nothing. For somebody that is having a hard time putting food on the table, that's a lot of money. So they're contributing what they can. And, of course, with the Affordable Care Act, everybody is going to have to contribute something, as I understand, going forward. And but this is desperately needed. This is $4 billion. And the other irony is, by most estimates, it's 10,500 jobs. That's far more jobs than you're going to get off any mine that may or may not be created in the future.
I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Oh, there's so many things.
Agree with me.
Yeah, I know. There's so many things. Well, let's just start by saying under the Affordable Care Act, if you make $11,000 a year, yes, you have a $19 a month copay or a premium. But you know what the deductible is? $2,000. So for those of us who had concerns about Obamacare going forward and having it be unsustainable, they are even more validated when you look at the facts of the plan. There is no way, and it's ironic, we're on sequester day, where we are arguing about whether or not we are going to cut less than 0.5% out of the increase in spending.
But we're not talking about
increase.
We're not talking about Obamacare here. We're talking about the state's decision
of
whether or not we want to have Badger Care expanded, which, Tommy Thompson, who used to be considered a conservative Republican, was the one that started. Now he's a liberal. In fact, when I ran into him, they were afraid of Dick Wheeler's funeral. He said, "Hey, Peter, I'm a liberal now."
And he is part of the reason that we have the massive deficit under Governor Doyle. There's no doubt about it.
Let me
thank you for punctuating my point.
It's true.
Let me do 2 things. One, we're going to run 5 minutes late today. Since we started 5 minutes late, that's only fair. But I don't want to get you in trouble when you go back to work or classes, so I just want to give you a heads up on that. And we do understand if you have to to leave a couple minutes early. Two issues that people in this part of the state know a lot about, residency and vouchers, because both are in the budget. And let's begin with the residency issue. I see the mayor sitting over there today. I know he's not a fan of the governor's proposal that would end, for all municipal employees around the state, the residency requirement, that you'd have to live in the town where you worked. Is that going to be part of the budget at the end of the day? Is it going to be removed from the budget? Where do we stand on that?
I believe
removal, right?
Yeah. I believe it will stay in the budget, but we have to wait and see the policy list that comes out from the Fiscal Bureau.
How do people in your party feel about that?
In general, I think the vast majority of people on my side of the aisle believe you should be able to live where you choose to live. Think of the world that we are in. I'm sure you probably saw the news where Yahoo had a policy where any of their employees could work from anywhere in the country. They didn't have to actually ever go into the office. They're now changing that back where you have to actually come into work on a regular basis. But that's a decision that people make in every single circumstance based on what is best for the workers who are inside that workplace. To have an artificial limit that says we only want to hire people from one municipality, it's just old and antiquated. If the criteria was for, let's say for a fire department, and we want to be able to have people respond to an emergency, so instead we say they have to live within 20 minutes of the fire station. Okay, that is directly related to their job based on what they think is the criteria to make them into an employee that would be more usable at the workplace. But to just say you could live further away in the city, but not necessarily live closer if you were in a different municipality, really is just all about politics. It's not actually about the job that they are doing or the freedom to attract better employees.
So is it an issue if you have, for example, in the city of Milwaukee, thousands of people applying for these jobs who know full well that they would be required to live in the city? Is it an issue that needs to be addressed if that is the current situation?
Well, there's no doubt. Let's just look at the Milwaukee schools right now. They have over 700 open positions that they are looking to hire. And what have they done? They said, we're going to go and try to recruit people in Spain and other countries to come to work here. I would rather say that, you know what, let's go out and recruit people who live anywhere in the state. Maybe they have a spouse who works in Madison, they want to live in Delafield, so they can live in the middle. Wouldn't you want to have the very best person who's a teacher to be able to teach at MPS, regardless of whether or not they lived in the geography of where the city of Milwaukee is? I would. I think it's about the employee and the results, not at the place that they choose to, pay their light bill.
Do you think that Democrats and maybe some Republicans, I guess that remains to be seen, do you think there's any chance that residency will not be approved?
Well, first of all,
ending of the requirement.
Well, they have the votes. In all likelihood, they can probably pass most anything, certainly in the assembly. But the issue is that, first of all, it illustrates what's wrong with Act 10. These are subjects of negotiation between employees and employers. We don't elect a governor to be king, to make decisions for every community, every township, every village, as to what he thinks is right. This was a subject of negotiation. And the mayor's been extremely articulate on this point when he brings up the fact that they have hundreds of people applying for these police and fire positions, knowing that that's a requirement. And in my judgment, this should be a subject of negotiations, and it's something that should be negotiated between an employer and employee. But that's a problem. Now you have a situation where the governor is going to hand out benefits to certain people outside of the collective bargaining and take away certain benefits from other groups of employees, and that's never been the way the state has functioned. For the last 50 years, we had Democrats or Republicans as governor that sat across the table and bargained in good faith, sometimes tough, and tried to work through their differences. I don't think we want the governor of the state to make decisions of who's going to get what benefits under what circumstances. And that's why we're so polarized as a state right now.
Philosophically, though, do you believe that people should be able to live where they want to live?
Personally, I would love to be able to see people live where they want to live. It is a different world. I do agree with that. But I think that it should be a negotiated item. I don't think that that's for me to make a decision for Milwaukee or for Waterford or for Superior. I mean, these are items that employers and employees negotiate over, just like your example for Marissa Mayer, who's from Wausau, incidentally, the new CEO of Yahoo. She made a decision and said that she believes that with the fiscal situation that Yahoo is in and their competitive situation, right now she wants people to be in the office. So if you're an employee there, you decide, do I want to live under these rules or do I want to leave for some other company in the Silicon Valley which doesn't impose these restrictions? But these are things that employers and employees should be working out, not for the governor We're not for legislators to impose our will on local communities and local decision making. I think that's a mistake.
But negotiation requires that each side is willing to discuss it. I mean, the mayor's here. He's already said he's not going to do it. They said go to Madison. I mean, they said go to Madison and fix it. I mean, they said go to Madison and fix it. It's been in place since 1932. So the only way they could do it is to come to the legislature. We are listening to people, and I have a pretty good feeling that we'll be able to get it done.
Let's talk about vouchers for a moment, because the governor wants to expand vouchers in the state of Wisconsin, make them available to 9 other communities. You said you were disappointed.
I am.
You wanted him to make it available throughout the state.
Right. I want universal vouchers. I do.
And so explain your reasoning for that. There are different people, even people who support vouchers. Somebody like Howard Fuller would disagree with you on that. He feels that they were designed to help low-income families. But you see it as a bigger, broader philosophical issue.
Let's just think about where we are as a community, as a state, as a nation, in relation to the rest of the world. I don't know how many of you have seen some of these movies, A Million Minutes, where it talks about the high school experience of India, China, and the United States, where you look at what's happening in other countries as far as what they're able to do and where we are able to get to. We are falling behind. We are not doing what it takes to be competitive in the rest of the world. A big reason is the educational system that we have has gone awry in many ways. I think that we are way too easy on allowing people to get a certificate when they graduate, as opposed to having that graduation mean something. But that's a situation that we've got to address in public schools. So as you look at where we are with children who are failing, think about it. If you are a grade behind in one of the first 4 or 5 grades of school, every single year that goes by, you build upon the one before. Why would we ever say it is more important about who writes the check out for the light bill in the school as opposed to the results that the school actually has for the students who are inside of it? That's what this entire debate is about. The reason that we want a good, educated young person is so they can become productive for the rest of their lives. I don't necessarily care if they get it in a public school, a private school, a voucher system, if they go in a homeschool situation, a virtual school. We are in a different world. And what happens is I think a lot of people are more stuck in the old model. You know, you go into a school today. I was in a Wheatland school the other day, and they have computers for every single child. They actually have a situation where you go into one room and they sang me the alphabet in Chinese. These are kids who live in the middle of rural Kenosha County because they were able to use Rosetta Stone and use the technology that really made their school different. And that's wonderful. If the parents want that school, they should have every right. But what if they're in a different school who doesn't have the opportunity to be innovative, and they are not doing a good job for their kids, and they're 2 or 3 grades behind? The only thing we can say is tough luck. That's the current situation that we have. I want the parents to make a choice. If their child is 1 or 2 or 3 grades behind, take a different way of going as opposed to have the situation right now, which is figure out how to run for the school board and try to make that better. I want the parents to have the choice.
Is there anything in the governor's proposal regarding vouchers that Democrats or you specifically could support?
Well, you know, let me start with what you ended with, tough luck. I mean, because that's what they're telling the public schools.
No.
They're freezing pure pupil spending in the public schools, which means for the classroom, there'll be no more money for public schools. And they're looking at a 29% increase in the per pupil spending for unaccountable voucher schools. And why do you say unaccountable? Because the Republicans have refused to require even background checks of teachers, much less requiring them to have to take the same tests that every public school student has to take, or to allow, you know, students with disabilities or others that are difficult to educate, that are more expensive to educate, in many cases, to be admitted into these voucher schools. This is the worst education budget, you know, in my judgment, in terms of just basic equity, fairness, and moving forward. And that's saying a lot because financially, the last budget was the worst ever, taking $1.6 billion out of the public schools. So it's almost like we're going to starve the public schools, make it difficult because of class sizes growing, AP course offerings being reduced, and then we're going to give a lot more money to the voucher schools, and we're going to say, look how much better the voucher schools are competing, and it's just an abysmal budget. But don't ask me, ask the Republicans. I mean, that's how far the Republican Party has gravitated to the right, in my judgment, because you've got some moderates left, like a Mike Ellis, that says, well, let's at least let a community have a referendum to see if this is what they want in their community. And the governor says, well, no, this is a statewide program. You know, half of the money, or somewhere near half, comes from property taxpayers. And they're going to have their money be taken out in school aids in order to support kids going to these unaccountable voucher schools. Well, why wouldn't you have a referendum? But how can you possibly justify giving 0% for public school classrooms and giving this huge increase for unaccountable voucher schools? That's why there's been so much consternation on the Republican side of the aisle, because Luther Olson, who takes a great interest in public education, is saying, wait a second. He said, how can you say, Governor, that any school district that has 2 schools that are failing, that students can come from some of the best schools and go to a voucher school, which isn't necessarily any better, in fact, could be far worse, and then you're not even helping that school that supposedly is struggling. So just common sense measures that Republicans are asking for certainly need to be implemented.
So, Speaker Voss, could you be willing to compromise on a requirement in legislation that would say communities have to vote on this? No.
No, of course not.
We
don't want local control. We don't want local control of our education. We want governor control of our education.
No, the difference is I am not going to say to kids who are in a failing school, you have to go out and beat the teachers union at the ballot box. That is never going to be a criteria that I will accept. Never.
Do you think there are any problems within your party, not so much in your chamber, but in the Senate? I mean, are there problems? Mike Ellis said on my TV show last week that he's got 6 or 7 or 8 Republicans who share his concerns about the voucher provisions in the budget. Do you think that's a problem?
Well, first of all, I think that we got to correct a few things. The budget right now has over $100 million in additional money to public funding to public schools. So 0 is wrong.
0% for the classroom, I'm saying.
Well,
I'm not saying for the property taxpayers. I'm saying for the classroom.
Let's just make sure the budget
We
as
freeze
defined.
per pupil spending.
No, the budget. No, first of all, we don't do that either.
Public schools.
No, the budget.
I know not for voucher schools. Public schools I'm talking about. I know you're giving a boatload of money for private unaccountable voucher schools. I get that.
And luckily, we're going to have a memo from the Fiscal Bureau, and I will be willing to bet you, we can put it on the record, $100 million more for public schools. You want to bet an expensive dinner like the one you asked me last time?
Well, let me put it this way. As long as you're willing to pay up for the one on the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, where the Fiscal Bureau said it was a tax increase, and you're still denying it.
So it all comes down to the fact that our budget has more money for public education. It has more money now. The Democrats hate, with a visceral attitude that you saw from my friend Peter, they hate voucher schools. Which is why for the past dozen years they haven't given increases to those schools, while every single year but one we have given increases to public schools.
I don't hate voucher schools
at
all.
That's why you won't give them any money.
First, I don't hate anything, but I don't even dislike voucher schools. What I dislike is what the governor actually proposed last time, which is what I suspect you want to get to, where people can make $250,000 a year, and the taxpayers are going to help them send their kids who might live in the south side of Milwaukee to send them to a private school in the north side of Milwaukee. And then pay for the busing too, perhaps. That's what I don't like. I like equity in education. I want to make sure that every student has the same opportunity for an equal education. That's what this country was founded on. That's what this state was founded on. This state has had a history and a value for supporting quality education. And we are diminishing that. When you take $1.6 billion out of the public schools, like you did last time, then obviously public schools are going to be struggling like they are. I was at a Super Bowl party, and at halftime, my kids are out of the public schools now because they're in college or in the workforce. But, the whole topic was, the AP course offerings that no longer are being offered, the class sizes in elementary schools, which are up by 30, 40%. And parents are very upset about that. And, and it's because we need quality public education for students in this state.
I'm going to stop there because I want to take a couple questions from the audience before it gets too late here. Just raise your hand. If you're in the seating bowl, please press down on the rim.
Oh, you got buttons.
Not on that. We'll start here.
I have a question for Representative Barca, really. I hear you want to spend more on education, and I have my own thoughts about that, but why is it you want to pour more into education so the kids can learn more and do better, correct? And then when they get to a certain threshold, you want to penalize the snot out of them and take it away from everybody to create an equal outcome rather than equal opportunity. Does that seem inconsistent in some fashion? you?
Well, first of all, that's not my position at all. I'm not even following the question. What do you mean when they reach a certain level, I want to penalize them? I don't want to penalize any child. I want every child in this state to have an equal opportunity to go to school and have a quality experience. Now, there's not going to be equal outcomes. I can't guarantee kids are going to get A's on exams or a B on an exam. That's up to their hard work and their ability to do well and to have the attitude to love learning and study. But do I want to make sure that every student at least has the opportunity to have an equal opportunity to have a quality teacher and have a class size that's reasonable so they can learn? Absolutely.
No, I understand that, but what I'm getting at is that once they do get out of school and they've entered the business world and they become successful, and they reach the $200,000 mark or $250,000, then you start hammering them and taking it away from them.
Absolutely not. I don't want to hammer anybody at $250,000 or $500,000 or $5 million. I'm just saying that they have the same opportunity to send their child to the Bradford High School, or my kids went to school, or Dimensions of Learning Academy, which was a charter school through the Kenosha Unified System. And whether you make $1 million a year, whether you make $15,000 a year, you should have that same opportunity to send those students there. That's what I believe.
Well, if you believe that, then you support school choice. Because if you make $15,000 a year, you can't afford the tuition, Peter. That's the whole point.
Let me take other questions here. Let me go back up here to the gentleman in the blue sweater. Yeah, press down on that.
Press that rim part.
Great. Does it work? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. What is Wisconsin doing to become more competitive and productive, and what is the state doing to compete with southern states and foreign countries?
Give you each a quick shot at that.
Sure.
Speaker Boss, you want to begin?
Well, probably the most significant thing that we did in the last budget was to change how we tax manufacturing in the state. Wisconsin basically has three main industries that we have had since statehood: manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism. What we did is we created the first in the country manufacturing tax credit. That means if you're Harley Davidson, you took and you exported jobs because you thought labor was cheaper in China and you could get work done over there. What we're doing is we actually said that if you are making things in Wisconsin, over the course of the next 5 years, we are phasing out the income tax on manufacturers. So that means that you can build things in Wisconsin cheaper than you can in Florida or other states around the country. Hopefully we're seeing insourcing happening right here to Wisconsin because people are realizing with that incentive, with no tax, you're able to do things cheaper than even in China because your market's right here in the United States. So I really believe that the tax incentives we are putting into place, number one, through the manufacturing tax credit, and trying to have an overall reduction in our tax code will have a long-term impact on where we are. But we're also doing some things to make investments, and we did that just yesterday. We had a proposal, a $20 million worker training proposal, because we realize that the tech schools, while they attempt to do a good general job, they are definitely not up to the task of where we are going in the future. I have a manufacturer in my own district who wants to hire welders. The tech school does a good job of teaching the very basic, rudimentary welding technology, gets them about 20% of the way there. But then they go to his business, and they have to be trained the rest of the 80% to use the exact equipment inside that facility. And we heard a story from Tim Sullivan that Caterpillar wanted to have an expansion right here in Wisconsin or in Texas. They came to us, and we basically, under the old Department of Commerce model, didn't really even get back to them in a timely fashion. Texas not only promised to have a facility built by the time they needed it, but they also guaranteed that 200 welders would be trained on their specific equipment that they needed. And where do you think Caterpillar chose? They chose Texas over Wisconsin. So we want to have a much more nimble system where workers can be trained inside the workplace using the equipment that they actually need, as opposed to the one-size-fits-all model, which is to just have everybody go to the tech school and let the business figure it out after that.
Take just a couple of minutes. What do you think the state is doing to improve its economic?
Well, I'll give one difference, and then I'll tell you what I think we need to do. And yesterday we did have a good day because we passed a couple Democratic bills that had to do with promoting manufacturing around the country, much like we promote tourism. Something desperately needed. If you increase demand for our products here in Wisconsin, you're going to put more people to work. Now, in terms of tax credits, though, you want to help manufacturers, but you have Epic in Madison that's not a manufacturer that's done more to end the brain drain than any company maybe in the history of the state. They've got 6,000 employees. I would guess 4,000 of them are probably under 30. And so, it's ironic because you always say picking winners and losers. But what the Democrats did by comparison is we gave a tax break when you created a job, because then there's a public benefit. You're putting somebody to work. Versus under the the impact of the last budget. If you sent jobs to China, you would get the same tax benefit because it's based on your profitability in terms of how much of a credit you got. So that's where I disagree with the implementation, because I think it should be based on doing a public benefit. But then in addition to that, something desperately needed is venture capital. I served at the governor's request on the venture capital task force. We had a consensus with everybody except for the Assembly Republicans who wanted to do this CAPCO model to be able to bring forward a venture capital bill, which I actually brought up in the Assembly last year, but they wouldn't take up to actually vote on. But that's something desperately needed, because when you look at our competitiveness as a state, we've done relatively well with angel investments at that initial phase of investment. But as a company grows and they're adding employees, Wisconsin historically has not had venture capital available to them to be able to grow and expand that company. I think that's desperately needed right now, and I think we will get something done this session. I'm actually relatively optimistic about that. I just hope we do something responsible.
Let me see if we got a couple more questions here. Yes, if you can keep it fairly brief.
Mr. Voss has heard me talk about this before, which is the Connecticut Sustenance Program that's being implemented for healthcare. They've now updated the amount of savings to the state of Connecticut. And I don't know why Wisconsin isn't looking at a sustenance problem. All they're doing is combining all the public service employees together in one program, all the Medicaid employees in one program, and now what they added to that was the public no-profit option from Obamacare, so they've upgraded it. So the savings estimated now in Connecticut have been upgraded starting next year, 2014, and I said this to you 2 years ago actually, to a minimum of $220 million a year and up to $280 million a year in a state with 1/3 the less people living in it than Wisconsin. Why aren't we looking at putting together a sustenance program? It's on the internet.
Let me get the question.
Legislation, just like you copy legislation from ALEC.
Please.
Oh,
Let him-
okay.
let's let him respond.
I always know whenever somebody uses the word ALEC that we are not on the same page. The whole goal that we have in healthcare is to not figure out a way to put more people into government programs. It's not about figuring out how to have more people take from those who are able based on their ability to pay. So what we want to do is, just like I had mentioned before, we want more people to be in the private health insurance market. I know you and I just don't agree on that, but I want people to be in the private health insurance market. I don't want a one-size-fits-all government-run health care program that tries to show it generates savings by just shifting the cost onto other individuals who aren't part of that same system. We see that's why Medicaid in Wisconsin has a huge negative impact. It does. Medicaid underpays everybody else. Talk to anybody who works in one of the healthcare systems, and they will tell you that the Medicaid system pays less than cost, so all of us who have private insurance have to make up for that difference. I don't want to go to that system.
But my only very short response, so we can get to others, is that the Hospital Association, almost all the medical providers supported expanding Badger Care. But despite that, the Republicans don't seem to want to be able to go forward with that.
All right, we're going to take one final question. Let me go right here.
This will be a very quick one. Will we see any right-to-work legislation coming out of your caucus in this term?
No.
In this term or any term, you should ask?
No, I mean, we can't make promises beyond the one term. I have been very clear in saying, let me back up and saying, I support right to work. I was the author of it in the past. I think just like I believe people should have the freedom to choose to live where they want, people should have the freedom to choose to work where they want. But I think I have the credibility in saying, as somebody who supports it, as somebody who is the author, we're not going to bring it up. And I want to be very straightforward about that.
This term?
Well, I can't say it. I'm going to get reelected. I mean, all I can do is talk about this 2-year term.
You won't if I have anything to do about it. No, I'm just kidding.
Bring it on, Barca. So that's all I can say, that it will not come up in this 2-year term.
But what I suspect is that, and it really was a Governor Walker's request, and the Speaker's been very clear, and I appreciate his candor. He does support it. He was an author of it, I think, in the past. Yep. He wants to see it happen, and it will happen if the governor is reelected in this state. Make no mistake.
Why don't you ask him that question?
They have, and he wouldn't answer. Remember, you can ask me Barrett about that one. He tried numerously to ask him, hey, can we just... And the issue is similar to Mitch Daniels. He said, well, I under no circumstances would I support right to work. And then all of a sudden he got reelected, and he said, well, you know what? Things have changed. Now I'm for it again. And I suspect the governor knows that the state's been polarized. He knows after what he did to public sector unions, everybody's on edge, and he wants to get reelected. And I suspect, just like Michigan, we probably won't even get to Christmas before they bring that bill up.
My final question is, how seriously are you considering running for governor?
Well, I've been trying to see if I can get Robin's support. So far, he hasn't been too warm to the idea.
Is it dependent on his support?
No, I have not really thought through that. I'm just trying to work with the speaker to get good things
You're
done.
at 42%, I saw. 42% is a good
Yeah, I
place
think
to
I'm
be.
only 3 points behind the governor, who spent, tens of millions of dollars to try and promote his candidacy, so that's not too bad.
We're going to wrap things up there. I want to say a special thanks to Speaker Robin Voss and Assembly Minority Leader Peter Marquette.
Very good. All right. Mike, thank you.
Thank you very much.